Welcome to Re-Review, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we're discussing The Hunt for Red October. It was released in 1990, directed by John McTiernan, starring Sean Connery, Alec Baldwin, and Scott Glenn. This movie tells the story of a Russian submarine captain defecting to the U.S. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 32-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. Bobby chose this one, so he gets to open up our discussion this week. Bobby?
Yeah, this movie seemed to me like it was just kind of like pure 90s testosterone, like Top Gun, like recruit into the Navy type movie. I mean, it's got a John McTiernan, as you mentioned, as a director who directed movies like Die Hard, and Jean de Bont, who directed Twister. So it's kind of like, oh, like, hey, like there's like some of the really fun, like other popcorn style movies that I enjoy. So here's Hunt for Red October, and I found it like very interesting with the director and the cinematographer. I mean, it's basically like, with the submarine situation, it's very like one of those contained kind of stories, kind of like Paranormal Activity or like Buried, where it was like just like it was kind of like intentionally claustrophobic, and so like
So
it was just
claustrophobic.
yeah, it was just like, okay, like they did the wide angle, like real close up, even in the scenes where they were kind of like more like in a conference room where there was space, like they even shot it like there was no space, like whip panning back and just up in people's faces. And I mean, like it was a very just artfully done movie, and I just appreciated the cinematography to it.
That's really true. I didn't think much of the scenes outside of the submarine, but you're used to, I feel like, with TV shows and even movies that revolve around being in government spaces, especially US government spaces. You get really big, wide shots to make you feel like, oh, you're in the presence of this really great space. And it really wasn't there.
There was that in the very beginning where they had like zooming kind of like tracking helicopter kind of shots, say like, like, hey, like you don't know that we're on top of a submarine because there's a really, really close up shot of Sean Connery's eyes, and then, track way, way, way far away to show like, okay, they're in a submarine. And then for the rest of it, with the exception of a couple of the helicopter shots, it's very like, like buried paranormal activity, like one room claustrophobic, and it's like kind of like the walls are coming in on you, kind of like suspense.
It did feel super, like you said, well, obviously early 90s being 1990, without necessarily hitting you with all the nostalgia points that I feel like we've hit on other films that we've watched from the era. Matt, how'd you feel?
It's one of those movies that I feel like on paper sounds like a really solid movie. The cast is obviously amazing. I mean, every name that popped up on the screen was like, oh, that guy. Oh, and then that guy. Oh, and that person.
There's a lot of names.
There's a lot. I mean, and all of them, I mean, quite a few of them are still active today. Unfortunately, obviously, a few of them have passed away since, but, it's an amazing cast. The director, cinematographer all have, a lot of clout to them. And then obviously just the basis of it being, a Jack Ryan story. I believe this was the first one in 1990 of the series. So obviously on paper it had all this stuff really going for it. It was a little bit before my time to actually watch it in theaters. I didn't see it till much later in life, but watching it again for the first time in, probably 2 decades.
Before your time, hold on, you were alive, sir.
I was alive, but I was in another country and I was way too young to be watching a movie like this. I was watching Care Bears and stuff like that.
I think I saw it on TV pan and scan on like a 13-inch TV. And
Really?
so
That sounds glorious. A CRT TV.
yeah, seeing it on a bigger screen and its full aspect ratio is, much better for the cinematic experience.
I definitely think that it would have been an interesting movie to watch in theaters. I think that the scale of it being much more compressed, as well as the nature of a submarine and being underwater, being very sound driven, being very atmospheric. I think it would have been pretty interesting to have the full surround sound going with the screen as big as it is in front of you. I'm watching this on a 40-inch screen, and I can only imagine what it would have been like to been inside of a theater to watch it. Obviously, back in the day type theater, but still would have been pretty nice to see. As far as my thoughts on it, it was enjoyable. I feel like the pacing was a little bit slow at the beginning. I definitely think that it picked up as it went on. There was parts where I did find myself drawn into the story. Again, the cast was pretty solid. I'm still torn on my thoughts on Sean Connery as a Russian sea captain. It's really hard to ignore the
Scottish sea captain. Hold on, let's get this clear.
So I will point out that I do appreciate the fact of the conversion from Russian to all of a sudden it's English, and
that was really interesting.
That I think that the way they did it was pretty interesting. I had forgotten how they did it with the zoom in on Sam Neill's mouth as he's talking, and then doing the slow gradient between the fade in and fade out between the two. And kudos to them for learning as much Russian as they probably did in order to do that. But then again, I don't know, maybe they had voiceover people come in and do that. But
probably be wise.
They still, having that conversion come in or whatever was good. Obviously it's something that happens more often now, but I do like the fact that it starts with Russian and transitions to English as opposed to just having them speaking English, right? Obviously the English is for us, not for anything else. So having it begin Russian and go to English, was a good little thing rather than just having it start that way. Yeah, it was an interesting watch. It definitely didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go. I had forgotten more than I remembered, to be honest.
Was for its benefit or for its negative?
From my point of view, for its negative.
Oh, interesting.
We'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there.
So let me open with my ignorance. You mentioned Jack Ryan as a character. This is the same Jack Ryan who is Chris Pine, who is John
and
Krasinski?
Harrison Ford from Clear and Present Danger. Same guy.
Ben Affleck too.
Ben Affleck.
My mind is being blown right now. I guess I didn't understand what was happening in this world.
So it's the same world as the next two movies, Clear and Present Danger, and I'm blanking on what the name of the third one is. But
Patriot
even
Games.
James, yes, you're correct. James Earl Jones is the same character throughout the next movie.
And you're hitting on the key thing. So I've actually never watched this before. There's a thing where I don't like claustrophobic things, which we opened up with. And I also have an aversion to submarine underwater explosions. And I blame, what was the movie I mentioned? What is it?
U571.
U571. I think I remember in my youth seeing the trailer for that film and not really appreciating how things explode underwater, more so not liking it. The idea of just being in a submarine and having it explode and drowning sounds terrible.
A really, really great implosion, underwater implosion is from The Abyss, when the underwater rover starts falling into the abyss at the bottom of the ocean. It implodes and it's brutal.
Everyone's taking away my movie card because I don't think I've seen The Abyss either.
Bringing up the idea of fears, I feel like I have the same thing about space movies sometimes, the ones that are shot not like Star Wars, but the ones that are more shot
Gravity.
Not the best example, but yes. Jumping between ships to get back to Earth. Just the idea of the fact that a small meteorite could go through the hole and just completely obliterate everyone or whatever. Just the idea of that, that thin wall is separating between you and oblivion. I've never really had that aversion to submarine movies for the most part. I do have that for cave movies sometimes.
Oh, I hate cave movies.
Yeah, the claustrophobic aspect of it. So I with U571, I definitely get that because that one was obviously a much more tragic take on it. And just the approach to it and the inevitable dread of the end result. This one,
Yeah, I'm
it
glad
was
they
more the
didn't.
spy thriller, right?
I'm so glad they didn't have any scenes in this where like there was a couple of the guys trapped and the water is slowly filling the
Yeah,
cabin.
that's the stuff that I can't handle, and I think that's why. Okay, you just rattled off multiple things about submarine movies, which I again have refused to watch. So, being the first submarine movie I've watched in ages, if ever, I find myself actually enjoying it in a weird way. I felt the story was compelling enough. I got into it, even though a lot of things felt missing. A lot of things felt really given over to the characters, where specifically where like Alec Baldwin, Jack Ryan, the character himself, is like, I know Ramius, I know Captain Ramius, I know exactly how this person thinks, and then it just works out perfectly that that's exactly how Ramius thinks. That may be a detriment, but I didn't mind it. And really, the whole time I was like, okay, I can just give in to this entire story, even though I don't know full motivation. All we got for Ramius is that his wife died, and he clearly despises, the Russian government as a result of losing his wife. So therefore, he's doing this. But I was kind of bought into it, and ultimately, what pulled me away was the use of technology at the most part, seeing the way they did the missiles, the just
You
the
mean not the technology portrayed by the submarines, but like you mean like the filmmaking technology of like
yes,
the
correct.
special effects and the
Yes, the
compositing and stuff
special
like that.
effects, not the technology in the world that they created for the story, but the actual looking at the film. There were just
Mhm.
parts that I was just like, this is really ugly.
Yeah, the matte painting and the matte tracking was
Right. Yeah.
it's so weird because a lot of the submarine shots I thought were really good. I think that,
Mhm.
obviously they used, fog and stuff like that to give the impression of it being underwater. But as soon as a torpedo showed up, or those little green deflectors,
The
that were
defense, the
countermeasures.
torpedo
Yeah,
defense.
Yeah.
yeah. As soon as those popped out, and then the final shot with the night to day conversion or whatever, it hurt, and it I can't even imagine seeing that on the big screen like that. That pulled me out for a little bit. I was like,
I
oh
know
no.
I know we're
Yeah, this
jumping ahead, but why that shot? This is the end of the movie, and it just was ugly. It was so bad.
yeah, it was clearly like on a stage, I wonder if they didn't have that scene originally and it was like a pickup kind of situation. Like, oh, like just hurry up and get this thing. Cause it did seem like it was outside of the rest of it, which I actually thought, as opposed for some of those torpedo things, which I mean, to be fair, like in 1990, they didn't really have like a particle simulation that was really convincing at the time. So it's like it's a difficult thing to pull off, like I think.
But here's the thing, at least from my point of view, and I feel like other movies have done this really well. I still haven't watched, what was it, Greyhound with Tom Hanks. That's another
Oh,
submarine movie.
yeah.
Um, you don't show it. If you can't do it, you don't show it. I feel like the sound of an approaching torpedo would be much more menacing than showing this bad CG effect. And maybe back then they thought it looked amazing. It's entirely possible, but I feel like the suspense of it's been fired and you hear like a sound, or you see on the sonar the approaching torpedo, is much more effective than showing it. I mean, it's like showing,
Mhm.
honestly, the first thing I thought of, and it stuck with me the entire thing, was Jaws 3D.
Mm.
And the shot of that
Right.
stupid shark slowly floating at like a glass window. That's exactly what I was thinking of when I saw that torpedo, and I was like, why? And you keep doing it.
I think I have to agree with you because the part that I felt most tense is when they had the torpedo passing by the ship closer to the end, where the idea is the sound went over the ship and, it only passed because they didn't arm it in time. And there was definitely a lot more tension to seeing this cheesy, multi-layered torpedo that just didn't look like it was actually in place.
Yeah. And it just, again, maybe it worked for them at the time. It was 1990. Maybe somebody saw this, like, it looks so real. I was sitting there in front of an N64 saying the same thing. So maybe they were too back then.
How dare you, sir? Nintendo 64 always looks real. How dare you? How dare you? You know, you mentioned Greyhound. It looks like so. This movie's from 2020. So you're saying there's a submarine movie where I don't have to watch the missiles?
Well, I mean, I haven't seen it, so it's been on my list for a while now. I feel like I
Same.
have seen quite a few of these submarine-esque movies over the years. And I feel like, the ongoing trend of them is typically the claustrophobia, the suspense, the dread, because there is no escape. Obviously, there's been real world scenarios of damage, stranded sub, stuff like that. So even if you don't get immediately annihilated, you could sit there and you could drown inside the sub that's supposed to protect you from the water. And
and the nuclear power part of it adds another
correct
disturbing element to it.
So typically that's the route that they go, right? It's rarely a Michael Bay movie where it's more about blowing stuff up.
I'm glad you brought up the nuclear element, because did all of those Russian Navy are they all dead?
No, that was all fake. That was all faked by the engineer.
Yes, you're right.
When the Americans came on board or whatever, he was like tinkering with the because the whole point of it was to get them off the boat. So they just faked it.
Thank you for reminding me of something that I clearly missed. So I'll flip back to the technology point and mentioning, a film from 2020. Looking at what they did, I kind of had this idea of, I would maybe enjoy seeing this remade, or at least the idea of it. What do you think of that? Do you think that they could perform this a lot better with today's tech?
Well, okay, so we'd have to clarify some things going into it. Is it a remake of this scenario? Because I feel like I don't think the Cold War really sells anymore. I don't think that it has the same relevance that it did in 1990, because clearly the Cold War was still going. Obviously, It was about to end, but for the most part, it was still going. The USSR still existed at the time. Could it be a more modern take on it, where some other countries that I don't know if I can mention or not, that we're in conflict with potentially at the time or in the near future, and it's a similar scenario potentially? If they do, and this is kind of my problem with this movie, it couldn't decide what kind of movie it wanted to be. Was it a suspense thriller on, is this guy going crazy with the nuclear weapons, or is he coming to switch sides, or is it all of a sudden now a kind of heist movie to try to trick everyone into thinking that this sub is being sunk? Or is it now a Die Hard movie where it's this I don't know how much we want to spoil this, but a person who has turned traitor on them to kind of sabotage the whole thing? It's like these three different movies kind of squashed together.
Okay, it's a heist hard. I feel like those options made the most sense to me.
To me, I honestly thought that this movie would have worked a lot better if it was really in question as to whether or not he was, turning traitor, or if he was going to attack the U.S. or not. I think
is that not how it was supposed to be? Or
but we found out so early that
not even midway through the movie, he openly admitted, because they had the little powwow with the rest of the Russian defectors or whatever about what their plan was.
Mhm.
Now, could he have possibly have been double betraying them too, and he was actually going to blow stuff up? But it didn't come across that way. Halfway through the movie, It was very well implied that they are they are trying to defect.
I mean, I think just the fact that it's Sean Connery too kind of like leans towards hero,
It
like
could have been
subconsciously a little bit.
It could have been so much more interesting to have him go that route where like you didn't know if he was going to press the button or not. If it was going to be like literally like the final moments was like, someone saying like, we're going to blow him up, and Jack Ryan's like, no, I know this guy. I'm because they had more of a relationship.
I think he told us 4 or 5 times that he knows that guy. Go on.
Yeah, in this version of the movie, he actually knows this guy, right? Like they've met more than once at a party in passing, tapping champagne glasses or whatever. Like he legit would have a reason to know him. to me, I think that would have been a much more suspenseful, interesting movie, and you didn't really know until the very end what direction it was going. The heist movie
Yeah,
probably would work,
agreed.
but it definitely wouldn't have had the suspense element, I don't think.
But I think the reference to the heist, I guess that kind of made sense in terms of what we just watched. So for 1990, maybe you both notice. I don't. Did this win awards?
Yes. I mean, technical awards. It won sound, best edit, or nominated for best sound, best editing, won for best sound design, I think was the
But
one.
not for the
And
story, not for the acting.
no.
No, and to be honest, I could totally see that. There was no particularly strong performance in here that, you know, made me think that there was going to be any sort of award for it. And they had the people for it. There was, some great actors in there that could have definitely pulled some great performances, but the script just wasn't there for it, I think.
Okay. Well, I think that'll lead us into the question that we tend to always ask is, so Bobby, since you chose this, are
Yes.
you pointing this out to people, recommending it to them to watch today?
I mean, I think it's a pretty interesting point in movie history, and I think that it comes from some of those, those powerhouses of, I mentioned Die Hard and Twister and some of those other films that some of the other people are involved in. And, I thought it was, like a pretty solid entry. I mean, yeah, I mean, the submarine genre is kind of like a very interesting subgenre, going on. And especially like the whole Jack Ryan thing. If people are interested in the whole Jack Ryan thing, I think that's very interesting too. So there's a lot of big Tom Clancy fans. So if you're a Tom Clancy fan, it's got to be on your list with all
Read a
the
book
other
and play a
8.
read a book and play a video game. Yeah,
Right.
whatever movies. Matt, are you telling people to watch this one?
To be completely honest, probably not. I think there's better Jack Ryan movies out there that you could watch. It's not a bad movie by any means, but as a Jack Ryan movie, there's definitely better options. And as a submarine movie, I think there's better options too.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that it's almost like it's not a Jack Ryan movie. He's kind of like there,
A
like
supporting character,
right, yeah,
a supporting character in his own movie.
right,
supporting to the submarine itself.
yes,
Yeah, yeah, literally.
Yeah, I guess I have to mix it up in terms of I think I both want to watch more Jack Ryan and submarine movies. I think that's A and B. I guess I want to see more of this world after watching this. I'm surprised because I definitely put this movie off for all the reasons that I mentioned earlier and just not in my wheelhouse or something that I would watch. And now I'm saying, maybe I'll give another submarine movie a try. Maybe I should start with the 2020 Tom Hanks movie and not go in order with something that might actually freak me out. But for me, it's a little bit of a give it a watch. It's interesting that we finally have something of a conflicting answer here, but it's good to know that Matt's saying, don't waste your time. And I'll probably watch it. I'll probably watch more things in the series. And Bobby says, give it a go. So
Making me the bad guy.
always the case. So it's good to know that we have those different perspectives to kind of see this movie in particular, because as you mentioned, it's a little dry at points, but again, I'm landing on I think it's a little bit worth watching. So as always, thank you so much for listening. And remember, the hard part of playing chicken is knowing when to flinch.